Before the Socratic dialectic, Platonic idealism, or Aristotelian formal logic, the ancient Greek world saw a bold thinker who changed the way people ask questions forever. Thales of Miletus. Often seen as the first pre-Socratic thinker, Thales wasn't just an early philosopher. He marked a major shift by leaving behind the myth-based stories of Homer and Hesiod, and choosing instead to explain the world through observation and early rational thinking. He doesn't just mark the shift from myth to reason. He represents the beginning of a way of thinking based on questioning and understanding the world through evidence and logic. One where nature becomes intelligible through intrinsic mechanisms rather than divine caprice. Although none of Thales's writings have survived, his intellectual shadow endures through secondary accounts by thinkers such as Aristotle, Simplicius, and Diogenes Laertius. These accounts show that Thales's impact was not just about what he believed, but how he thought. He proposed the bold idea that the universe follows understandable rules that human reason can uncover on its own. This is 5 Minutes of Culture, your intellectual portal to the axial moments in the history of thought. We invite you to share your reflections. Was Thales a singular visionary, or merely the most fortunate among many equally bold pre-Socratic minds, whose voices time has obscured? Leave a comment below and join the ongoing discourse. Situated on the Anatolian littoral, Miletus was a confluence of Mediterranean commerce, cultural syncretism, and intellectual ferment. It was within this cross-cultural matrix, where Egyptian engineering intersected with Babylonian astronomy and Near Eastern cosmogonies, that Thales initiated the first systematic inquiry into the ontological substrate of reality. He proposed water as the primordial arche, or originating principle, from which all entities derive and to which all entities return. This choice, though seemingly elemental by modern standards, was an epochal departure from supernatural ideologies. Thales's idea wasn't just about matter, it was a groundbreaking method. He suggested that nature follows its own rules and processes, not the random will of human-like gods. Water, with its observable polymorphism, liquid, vapor, and solid, and its vital presence in biological life, offered a coherent explanatory candidate for a cosmos perceived as dynamic, fertile, and interconnected. So, his thinking introduced a way of understanding the world, based on natural patterns instead of myths, creating a lasting connection between observation and theory that still forms the foundation of scientific thinking. The concept of an arche extends beyond simple observation. It represents a deeper philosophical endeavor to explain all things through a single fundamental principle. Thales's claim that water is the basic substance of all things initiated a tradition of monistic thinking, where later philosophers sought increasingly abstract principles underlying the natural world. His methodological innovations extended into geometry and astronomy. Diogenes Laertius attributes to him the geometric deduction of pyramid height via shadow analysis, while Herodotus and Aristotle refer to his prediction of a solar eclipse, conventionally dated to 585 BCE. If true, this achievement suggests an early form of astronomy based on repeating cycles, likely influenced by Mesopotamian knowledge passed along through trade. Thales wasn't just a thinker with abstract ideas, he was a pivotal transitional figure, an early empiricist whose approach to observing the world foreshadowed the modern scientific method. His insistence on intelligibility, measurability, and formal abstraction marks the incipient convergence of philosophical speculation and what would later become empirical science. Thales' cosmology posited the Earth as floating upon water, a motif not unfamiliar to ancient Near Eastern mythologies. But his bold move was taking this idea out of a religious context and turning it into a scientific explanation based on natural causes. He thereby transformed inherited cosmograms into philosophical cosmogonies. The intellectual import of this transition cannot be overstated. Thales's speculative model, however rudimentary, displaced teleological accounts in favor of material self-sufficiency. He articulated a universe whose generative principles resided within nature itself, a cosmos governed not by mythic intentionality, but by discernible mechanisms. This early view of the cosmos helped pave the way for removing gods from explanations of how the world works, a shift that would fully take shape in the mechanical theories of the Enlightenment. In Thales, we observe the nascent impulse to ground knowledge in autonomous rationality, foreshadowing the methodological naturalism of modern science. Simultaneously, his engagement in civic life and infrastructural engineering speaks to a model of practical philosophy in which theoretical insight translates into social utility. As a member of the Seven Sages of Greece, Thales exemplified the fusion of speculative acumen and political prudence, a paradigm of the philosopher as public intellectual. The school Thales inspired, later termed the Milesian tradition, included figures such as Anaximander, who posited the apeiron, the indefinite or boundless, as the cosmic substratum, and Anaximenes, who proposed air as the foundational principle, modulated by processes of rarefaction and condensation. Each successor preserved the essential methodological ethos initiated by Thales, a commitment to unity, rationalism, and systemic explanation. This intellectual trajectory constituted the earliest philosophical attempt to construct a coherent cosmological architecture without recourse to theological dogma. The Milesian thinkers began a way of talking about existence that shaped classical metaphysics, eventually leading to Plato's use of dialogue and Aristotle's focus on purpose in nature. Thales holds a foundational place not just for his ideas, but because he shifted the focus from divine revelation to human-driven investigation and understanding. In this, he inaugurated a tradition in which the cosmos became a legible text, written in the language of proportion, pattern, and principle. And so we pose the question, can the legacy of Thales be meaningfully disentangled from the interpretive overlays of his successors? Engage with us in the comments. The enduring import of Thales resides not in any specific cosmological claim, but in the methodological precedent he established. He catalyzed an intellectual revolution wherein the pursuit of understanding became secular, systematic, and open-ended. Thales' intellectual posture modeled the scientist-philosopher as both visionary and practitioner, an agent of cognitive transformation who interrogates the world through observation, deduction, and analogy. This archetype resonates through the ages, finding expression in figures from Archimedes to Galileo to Newton. His legacy also resides in the institutionalization of doubt, the idea that explanation must be earned, not inherited. By privileging reasoned argument over ancestral tradition, Thales laid the groundwork for a culture of critical inquiry, a project that remains ongoing in both the humanities and sciences. Thales of Miletus is not merely a historical figure, but a conceptual archetype, the philosopher as progenitor, the scientist as seer. He marks the threshold where myth gives way to method, where narrative yields to argument, and where the cosmos becomes a terrain of rational exploration. His significance isn't about being factually right, but about opening the door to a new way of thinking, the belief that we can understand the world through careful, rational thought. His inquiries gave rise to new modes of abstraction, theorization, and measurement, tools that would come to define the very possibility of knowledge. This has been 5 Minutes of Culture. We invite your reflections. Is Thales the true progenitor of scientific rationality, or do we mythologize him as we once did the gods he displaced? Share your views below, and remember, every revolution in knowledge begins when someone dares to ask, what lies beneath?